Welcome back to our channel. My name is Napoleon, and today we're covering the cases of Glennon Engleman, Collin Howell, and Barton Corbin, three of history's most evil dentists. If you do enjoy the video, please hit the like button, let us know in the comments what stories you want to hear next, and for more true crime videos, please subscribe and hit the bell icon. This is True Crime Planet. Our first case takes us to St. Louis, Missouri, where on February 6, 1927, Glenn Engleman was born. Glenn would have a pretty normal childhood and would follow in his father's footsteps when he would join the United States Air Force. And in 1954, Glenn would graduate from Washington University with a degree in dentistry. Glenn began to practice dentistry, but it seems like the dentist's salary was never enough for him. So Glenn began to hatch insurance schemes to come up with some extra money. In 1958, Glenn teamed up with his ex-wife Ruth to kill her new husband, James Bullock, and share his life insurance payout. Then, in 1963, Glenn convinced a business associate named Eric Frey to help him blow up a well on a property that he owned. But this was all a trick. Glenn pushed Eric into the well and blew it up with him inside, collecting an insurance payout for his death. In 1976, Glenn convinced a young woman named Carmen who worked at his dental office to marry a man named Eric Frey and take out a life insurance policy on him. The whole plan took about a year, but once the two were married, Glenn shot Eric and Glenn and Carmen shared his life insurance payout. In 1977, Glenn would kill the entire Goosewell family in a plot he hatched with Ronald Goosewell's wife to collect millions in life insurance and to inherit the family's oil business. The money from this scheme would of course be shared with Glenn. And in 1980, Glenn would kill Sophie Barrera in an attempt to erase a $14,000 debt that he owed to her. This, however, would be Glenn's last murder. A short time later, police would become suspicious of Glenn. They convinced one of Glenn's ex-wives to wear a wire, which recorded Glenn bragging about his crimes. And finally, on September 25th, 1980, Glenn would be found guilty of his crimes and be sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 50 years. Glenn would not last nearly long enough to see the parole board though. In 1999, Glenn died in prison from complications from diabetes. Our next case takes us to Northern Ireland to cover the story of Dr. Collin Howell. Collin Howell was born on March 14, 1959 in Portadown, Northern Ireland. Collin had a pretty normal childhood, and as an adult, he became a successful dentist. Collin married a woman named Leslie, and the two had 4 children together, but in the early 1990s, Collin began to have an affair with a woman named Hazel Stewart, who was married herself to a man named Trevor Buchanan. In May of 1991, Collin and Hazel hatched a plan to kill both of their spouses. Collin drugged and murdered both his wife Leslie and his mistress husband Trevor. Collin used the same method to kill both of them separately, attaching a garden hose to the exhaust of a car and poisoning both of them with carbon monoxide poisoning. After the two were dead, Collin would place them both in Leslie's car, staging the scene that Leslie and Trevor were actually involved in an affair, and executed a pact to end both their lives. Collin ran a hose into the car from the exhaust to make the story more believable, and surprisingly, police bought it. Collin would receive a large life insurance payout from the death of his wife, which he would quickly blow, getting scammed. And after things died down a bit, Collin and Hazel would start a relationship, but that would end a few years later. Collin would remarry a few years later and have 5 children with his new wife. Only 2 years into the marriage, Collin confessed to his new wife that he had killed his first wife. She overlooked this for years, but after things began to fall apart in Collin's life and in their marriage, she would convince him to confess to church elders, who promptly notified the police. And on November 18, 2010, Collin Howell would be found guilty and receive a sentence of life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years, and he is still in prison till this day. His mistress, Hazel Stewart, would also receive a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 18 years. Our last case would take us back to the southern United States, to the state of Georgia, to cover the story of Dr. Barton Corbin. Bart Corbin was born on December 22, 1963, in Jacksonville, Florida, and would grow up in Georgia. Bart would attend the University of Georgia and later dental school, and in 1996 he would marry a woman named Jennifer Barber, and they had 2 sons together. Their marriage lasted some years, but eventually things would begin to fall apart when they were both discovered to be having affairs. The two would agree to divorce and separate, but on December 10, 2004, their son would find Jennifer dead with a revolver by her side and their divorce paperwork tucked underneath her.
When I woke up this morning, I wanted to go see my mom if I could have breakfast, and then I saw a gun right by her, and there was blood right here.
Initially, Jennifer's death was ruled as suicide and Bart wasn't suspected, but Jennifer's parents knew their daughter wouldn't do that, and they pressured police to investigate further. The medical examiner noticed inconsistencies with the entry wound angle, as well as the lack of gunpowder residue and blood on Jennifer's hands, and knew right away they were dealing with a homicide. A tip also came into police that one of Bart's ex-girlfriends had died years earlier under suspiciously similar circumstances. In 1990, Bart was dating a woman named Dorothy "Dolly" Hearn. A few months after the two broke up, Dolly was found in her home dead under similar circumstances. Initially, her death was ruled a suicide. Investigators reopened Dolly's case and found similar inconsistencies with her death. Police knew that Bart was involved, but needed some more evidence, and that came in the form of Richard Wilson. Police tracked down the gun that was found with Jennifer, and it came back to a man named Richard Wilson, who was an associate of Bart.
He said that he thought his wife was fooling around on him. He thought he needed a gun to protect himself. He knew I had guns. He asked me if I had one, and I gotten one a while back. Traded it for a used lawnmower.
Richard denied any involvement at first, but eventually confessed to police that he had traded the gun to Bart for a used lawnmower, but he had no idea what Bart had planned. With this information, along with lots of holes in Bart's alibi, police would arrest him and charge him with both murders. And in late December 2004, Bart Corbin would be found guilty and sentenced to serve 2 concurrent life sentences and is still in prison now. Thank you for watching the video today. If you did enjoy it, please hit the like button and let us know in the comments what stories you want to hear next. And to show some support, please subscribe and hit the bell icon. This is True Crime Planet.